Today I'm going to teach you step by step how to make a super simple hand bow, how to add ribbon tails into your designs, how to make your own wreath form using Dollar Tree items, and my top 6 deco mesh methods. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got new wreath making tutorials uploading every week. Welcome to Stillwater's Wreath Designs. Come on in. The supplies you'll need will be a 14-inch wire wreath frame, some white chenille stems that are 12 inches long, and a good pair of scissors, all of which you can grab at the Dollar Tree. I'm going to show you how to prepare your wire wreath frame from the Dollar Tree so that it's ready to load with Deco Mesh. So I'd like to teach you really quickly how to make your own work wreath form that's much more cost effective. So when you take a look at your wire wreath frame, you're going to see that there are 6 sections, and a section is the area from one crossbar to the next. That constitutes one section, and there are 4 rings, 1, 2, 3, 4, so that you've got 6 sections, and we're going to add 3 pipe cleaners per section. We'll start with the inner section. So if we take a look at these rings, and we would say this is ring 1, ring 2, ring 3, and ring 4. You're going to first focus on the inner 2 rings, rings 1 and 2, and all you're going to do is add 1 pipe cleaner around rings 1 and 2 in the center of each section. So you're just going to wrap that around rings 1 and 2, give it a couple of tight twists, and then point those guys towards the inside of your wire frame. Once you've got your 6 pipe cleaners added to the inner area of your wire wreath frame, it's time to then add the pipe cleaners to the outer ring. And we're going to do the exact same thing. However, we're going to be adding 2 per section all the way around your wire wreath frame. And you're just going to take your pipe cleaner, wrap it around rings 3 and 4, give them a couple of tight twists, and this time point them outwards. And so you're just going to center those as best as you can, leaving 1.5 inches or so to 2 inches between the crossbar and chenille stem number 1, and then a couple of inches between your 2 pipe cleaners and then also that last crossbar. And you're just going to follow the same recipe all the way around. All right, friends, so we've added in 18 pipe cleaners into the 14-inch wire wreath frame. You should have 3 per section, 1 on the upper 2 rings and 2 on the outer 2 rings. The last step is to add a little bit of hot glue right where those pipe cleaners meet the wire wreath frame. This will just keep those pipe cleaners from sliding around. That's all there is to it, friends. You've just completed your work wreath form for a couple of dollars in less than 5 minutes. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up. It helps my little channel to grow. Let me show you how to make a super easy bow for your wreaths. We're going to be using 2 1.5-inch wide wired ribbons and 1 4.5-inch wide wire ribbon. You're also going to need a good pair of scissors, a standard ruler, and a coordinating pipe cleaner. Go ahead and lay your ruler out in front of you, and take your pipe cleaner and just fold it into a loose V. We'll be using these to secure our bows. We're going to start out with the 4-inch snowman ribbon. You can use as many or as few ribbon types as you would like. Just make sure that your ribbon is wired. For this particular bow, I want an 8-inch tail, so I'm going to lay my ribbon down and identify that 8-inch mark. Pinch and gather that ribbon into my hand. My left hand will be my holding hand and my right hand my working hand. We're going to give this ribbon a hard twist, and I would like a 4.5-inch loop. So I'm going to measure out to that 9-inch mark, because when we fold this over, it'll give us that 4.5-inch loop. Here I'm just pinching my ribbon. I'll fold that underneath into my hand. I'm going to give that ribbon a hard twist underneath my thumb. We're going to measure out to the 9-inch mark again to make our second 4.5-inch loop. I'm just pinching my ribbon and then folding it underneath my thumb. So now we need to cut a tail. So I'm going to measure out to that 9-inch mark again and cut. Let's move on to the second layer. Next up is a 1.5-inch ribbon. Again, exact same measurements, guys. So I'm going to measure out to that 8-inch mark to give us our tail. I'm going to give that a pinch, lay that right on top of the previous. I'm going to give that a hard twist underneath my thumb. I'm going to measure out to that 9-inch mark again, which will give me our 4.5-inch loop. Give that a pinch, fold it underneath my hand, another hard twist, measuring out to that 9-inch mark, giving it a pinch, folding it over, and I want one more. So we're going to have 3 loops of this ribbon type. So I'm coming out to that 9-inch mark, giving it a pinch, and folding it over. So as you can see, we've got 2 loops on one side and 1 on the other, and we're going to cut our 8-inch tail. And you guys, not looking for perfection, just approximate. Now we can move on to our last ribbon type. This is also 1.5 inches. We're going to be following that same process as before, making 3 loops and 2 tails. This time, however, we'll have the 2 loops on the opposite side as the previous 2 loop. So I'm measuring out that 8-inch tail, giving it a pinch, laying that underneath my thumb, giving it a hard twist. And this time, guys, I'm just going to eyeball and measure it against those previous loops. So there's 1, hard twist, 2, hard twist, and 3. We'll cut our 8-inch tail. And we're going to grab a pipe cleaner that we had folded into a V earlier. We're going to wrap this around our bow stack and give it 4 or 5 super tight twists. Now I'm going to take my scissors and angle trim all of my ends. You could also dovetail if you wish. So I'm just coming down about 1 inch on the right side and cutting up diagonally to the corner for all of those tails. To fluff out your bow, I like to start in the back, open up those loops, let those tails run in the opposite direction of one another, kind of catty corner, and then we'll take those 1.5-inch loops, and those 2 that are identical will go into a V pattern, and then the single loop will go in between, and we'll do the same on the opposite side. Placing those like loops into a V pattern and leaving the single in the center. Then I like to run my finger over those tails just to give them a little bit of a curve. And this beauty is finished. It's the perfect size to add into any wreath that's 28 inches in diameter or smaller. I've got a quick tutorial for you today on how to add wired ribbon tails into your Deco Mesh wreath. When you're choosing your ribbon for your ribbon tails for any wreath, I always recommend that you choose wired ribbon. It's my preferred method to pair a 2.5-inch ribbon with a 1.5-inch ribbon. I feel like that really gives lots of depth and dimension and character to your Deco Mesh wreath. And I always measure the 2.5-inch ribbon at 12 inches. So you want those tails to be 12 inches. And in order to get those 12 inches, friends, let me just show you real quickly an easy way to cut your ribbon with quickness. An easy way to cut your ribbon with quickness in bulk if you don't have a ribbon board is to simply measure out your ribbon at 12 inches using your self-healing mat or a ruler. And once you find that 12-inch spot, then just mark it with your finger, lay it flat on its back, and pinch it down, and then you're just going to fold your ribbon over the number of times that you need. In my case, I'll be needing 6 pieces. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Once you have that exact number of pieces, friends, just go ahead and cut your ribbon off. Sit that roll off to the side. Then, keeping your ribbon stacked together, find that center. Slide your scissors up into that center and cut them in half. There at the end. Flip your ribbon stack over and do the exact same thing on the other side. And instantly, you have the exact number of pieces of ribbon that you need. So you can choose then if you want to trim your tails with an angle cut or a dovetail cut. If you're not familiar with how to cut a dovetail, let me just get a scrap piece of ribbon. To make a dovetail, you simply fold your ribbon in half. Place your scissors on the folded side, not the open side, coming down 1/2 to 3/4 an inch, cutting up on the diagonal to the corner. And when you open your ribbon, then you'll have a nice dovetail. To cut your ribbon at an angle, which is how I'm going to trim my ribbon today, first of all, don't overload your scissors. Know the strength of your scissors and the quality of your scissors and how many ribbons your scissors can comfortably cut. If you overload them, then you'll have a jagged edge. Marry your tops, and for an angle cut, come down 3/4 an inch on the side and cut up on the diagonal to your corner. Flip your ribbon stack over to the other end. Make sure those ends are all equal and married up. Do the exact same thing, come down 3/4 an inch, cut up on the diagonal, and now both of your ends are trimmed at the diagonal going the same direction. And you can move on to your next stack. So I recommend ribbon prepping before you add your tails in. And ribbon prepping just means that you're cutting all of the pieces that you need and getting them ready to stuff into your wreath base all at one time. Once you have your ribbon tails cut and the ends trimmed, go ahead and pair them up in the order that you'd like to place them. You always want to place 2 ribbon tails per set of ties on your Deco mesh wreath. And as I mentioned earlier, friends, it's my preference to marry a 1.5 inch ribbon with a 2.5 inch ribbon. It's certainly your choice though. I just recommend that you do add 2 ribbons. And so I like to just pair them up so that I can visually see the order that I'd like to place them together. And so I've got these 3 ribbon sets that I'll be pairing together, each one with a 2.5 inch ribbon, each one with a 1.5 ribbon. I'll then sit them off to the side so that each pair is side by side. And then go ahead and grab your Deco mesh. I already have this wreath base prepped, friends. This is actually a 14.5 inch wired wreath base with 25 inch cruffles in each attachment, in each tie, and each tie is left intact. And if you've not worked with a wreath base before, friends, they're kind of like stiff Chanel stems or pipe cleaners. And so to add your tails into the Chanel stems, I alternate back and forth to give good variety. And so I simply take the 2.5 inch ribbon tail, lay that in my hand, place that 1.5 inch ribbon tail in my hand on the center. Then either by eyeballing it, find your center point, or you can fold it in half, give it a little pinch, and then that bent area is your center. Then with your thumb and your pointer finger, you'll pinch and pleat at that middle center until you have what resembles a men's bow tie. Then just kind of push that up and over your finger so that it looks like a V. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can either start at your top layer of ties or your bottom layer, it matters not. For purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to start at the top. You'll add that center of your V right down to the base of your chenille stems. Give it a couple of tight ties, and then fluff out your ribbon tails. And by fluff, that just means you can kind of pull them in place, lay them how you would like to lay them. The great thing about wired ribbon is that it will hold the shape that you push it into. So that's why that's the preferred. Then just spin your Deco mesh wreath around. Find your next set of ribbon pairs. Again, taking the 2.5 inch tail, laying on top the 1.5 inch tail, finding that center by folding it in half. And then that middle line is your center. Pinch and pleat, pinch and pleat. Fold that into a V over your finger. It's okay if it's sloppy looking or crooked. And then just add that into your next set of wreath ties. Place the center of your ribbon V all the way down to the base of those ties. Give them a couple of tight twists and fluff out your ribbon. And you just keep doing this all the way around your wreath base, friends, on both the upper and the lower level. Now, when it comes to your ties, a couple of things. If you are adding in additional pieces or embellishments of any sort, of course, you would leave those ties on so that you could use them to continue to build up your wreath. Most times when you're making a Deco mesh wreath and adding in tails, the tails is the last step. So once you get those ribbon tails added into your base and twisted down tightly, then just grab a pair of wire snips. You can get these from the hardware section or from Amazon. I'll actually leave a link to these below in case you'd like to grab a pair. And then you simply take your snips and snip off each of these bits so that they're out of the way and not visible. And there you have it, friends. That's how you add your ribbon tail. So again, each tail is 12 inches in length. Once you've cut all of your ribbon pieces, go ahead and trim your ends, either at an angle as we've done here, or by dovetail. Pleat them together in the center, fold them into a V over your finger, and then add them down to the center of your ties, couple of tight twists, and fluff out your ribbon tails. That's it, friends. Easy peasy. I hope you enjoyed this quick ribbon tail tutorial, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like all things wreath making, be sure to hit that subscribe button. The one roll Deco mesh method on a Dollar Tree frame. Friends, if you are new to the Stillwater's channel, Stillwater's Wreath Designs is all about DIY wreath making tutorials. We've got new tutorials uploading every single week, so if you like that sort of thing, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button and join us. You'll find a full materials and tool list for you below in the description of this video. Okay, let's dive in. Go ahead and plug in your hot glue gun. If you're new to wreath making, friends, this is what's called a wire wreath frame. We'll be using the Dollar Tree wire frame today, and the frame, if you can see, it's a little bit beveled on the front side. The back side is flat. You've got 4 rings, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You'll find crossbars all the way around the wreath to give that wreath stability. And the space between one crossbar and the next is what we call a section. We're going to do today's wreath using the one roll Deco mesh method. This is a really easy and cost-effective way to make a wreath. The first thing we need to do is build out our wreath base. And so I want you to grab a handful of standard 12-inch length pipe cleaners. You're going to need 18 in total. You'll want to grab some pipe cleaners that somewhat match in color to the theme of your wreath. And we're going to add 3 pipe cleaners per section. So pipe cleaner number 1 is going to go around rings 1 and 2 right in the center of those 2 crossbars. So I'm just going to run that underneath rings 1 and 2, right in the center there, and give them a couple of tight twists and point those guys inwards. Then the next 2 pipe cleaners are going to go around rings 3 and 4, and they'll be pointing outwards. So we're going to center these as best we can. Not looking for perfection here, guys. No one's going to be measuring. And so the 3 pipe cleaners should look something like this in your first section. So the first pipe cleaner is in the center of your 2 crossbars around rings 1 and 2. And then the other 2 pipe cleaners will be around rings 3 and 4, also centered about a third of the way in between those 2 crossbars. We're going to repeat this same pattern in every single section all the way around our wire wreath frame, and I'll meet you back here. Once you've got all of your pipe cleaners added into the wire wreath frame, it should look something like this. So you should have 3 per each section. And the next step is to add a little dollop of glue where the pipe cleaners meet our wire frame, just to keep those guys from sliding around. I'm just going to add a dollop of glue on rings 2 and 3 where those pipe cleaners meet the frame. We don't need to glue both sides, one will do. I'm just running an inch bead of glue right on top of those pipe cleaners and our wire frame to anchor those guys down. And of course, I've put an old piece of cardboard underneath just to catch any glue drips. Once you've added a dollop of glue to all of your pipe cleaners, go ahead and give your wreath about 5 minutes to dry. And then we'll begin adding in our Deco mesh. 10-inch roll of Deco mesh. We'll be using just this roll. And I've also grabbed my 12-inch ruler. And today we're going to use what's called the poof and double curl method. This method, friends, is really great to help reduce fraying. If you're new to working with Deco mesh loves to fray, and so anything that we can do as a creator to help reduce that fray is always ideal. At this point, your wreath doesn't have a top or bottom, so you can start at any point here on your wreath frame. We're just going to start on the outer level of pipe cleaners, and I like to roll out 1.5 feet or so of my Deco mesh. And the first thing we need to do is anchor it down. And so what I'm going to do is place my thumbs stationary on the mesh and use my other fingers to crawl that mesh back into my hand. So we've got this little tail, and then I'm going to take that tail and tuck that back under into my hand to tuck away that raw edge and help reduce that fray. So coming to any set of pipe cleaners on that lower level, we're going to open up the set of pipe cleaners into a wide V, and then we're going to take our Deco mesh tail and place it all the way down to the base at the center of that V, and then give those pipe cleaners 2 or 3 super tight twists and point them outwards again. And what we've done here, friends, is anchor down our mesh. We're going to use 10-inch poofs for the lower level. And so what we're going to do is grab our ruler, place that right on the most recent pipe cleaner that we've used, identify that 10-inch mark, and again, guys, not looking for perfection, no one's going to be measuring. And then at that 10-inch mark, we're just going to scrunch and gather that mesh just like we did earlier and pinch that between our fingers. We'll come to the very next set of lower level pipe cleaners, take that pinch and place it all the way down to the base at the center of the V of those pipe cleaners and give them 2 or 3 tight twists, just like that. And we've just added our first lower level 10-inch poof. Let's do one more together and then we'll speed ahead. So we'll grab our ruler, lay it on the most recent set of pipe cleaners that we've used, identify that 10-inch mark, pinch and gather our mesh to create that poof. We'll come to the very next set of lower level pipe cleaners and open them into a V. And then we'll place that mesh all the way down to the base of that V. And then give those pipe cleaners 2 or 3 tight twists to really secure that poof in. Go ahead and repeat the same process all the way around the lower level of your wreath frame, and then I'll meet you back here. It's time to add our last lower level poof. And so we're going to follow that same method as before, friends. Go ahead and lay that ruler down on your most recent set of pipe cleaners. Identify that 10-inch mark. Scrunch and gather your mesh. And we're going to be adding this last poof right on top of where we anchor down our tail. And so I'm just going to gently untwist those pipe cleaners and then add this poof right on top. And I promise, guys, it's not going to go anywhere. Deco mesh has a good memory. So as long as you're careful, you can just place that guy right on top of where we started, all the way down to the base. Give those pipe cleaners a couple of tight twists, and we've just added our last lower level poof. And so now we're going to repeat that same process on the upper level. The only difference is that upper level is going to have 8-inch poofs, and we need to jump our mesh from the lower level to the upper level. So identify that first set of pipe cleaners on the upper level that's closest to where we're making the jump. Grab that mesh and pull it tautly in your hand. We're not making a poof. And place it down at the center of the V of that upper level set of pipe cleaners, and give it a couple of tight twists and point those guys inwards. Let me zoom in here for you, friends. So as you can see, that jump from the lower level to the upper level is only about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, and it's just a taut jump of our mesh. And now we can carry on with adding in our upper level poofs. So we'll lay our ruler down at that first set of upper level pipe cleaners. We'll identify that 8-inch mark. And again, not looking for perfection here, guys. Scrunch and gather that mesh into your hand. Come to that very next set of upper level pipe cleaners. Open them into a wide V and press and place that mesh all the way down to the base of that V. Give those pipe cleaners 2 or 3 tight twists, and you've just added your first upper level poof. Go ahead and repeat that same process all the way around that upper level, adding 8-inch poofs, and I'll meet you back here. It's time to add our last upper level poof. So we're going to take our ruler, place that on top of our most recent set of pipe cleaners, identify that 8-inch mark, scrunch and gather our mesh, and we're going to add this on top of the pipe cleaners where we made the jump. So just spread those pipe cleaners into a wide V, place that mesh right on top, and give it 2 or 3 tight twists. And we've just added our last upper level poof. So now we need to cut off the remaining bit of our mesh. So go ahead and grab your scissors. And here's what I do, guys. I just take my mesh and I'm going to use my left hand as a guard, and I'm going to lay that between my excess mesh and the neighboring poof. I'm just going to come up about 1.5 inches on that mesh and gently cut it off, leaving about a 1-inch tail, which is totally fine. Nobody's going to see it. And so now we've just finished adding all of our poofs into our wreath base, and it's already looking super cute, nice, light and airy. However, we do need a little bit more coverage. And so we're going to move on to the next set of adding our deco mesh in, which would be curls. So go ahead and set your wreath base off to the side. And we're going to cut the entire remaining bit of our deco mesh roll. I'm going to use my rotary cutter and self-healing mat to cut the remaining roll of our deco mesh. If you're new to wreath making, friends, and you're not familiar with the self-healing mat, they come in a variety of sizes. The one that you see here in the background is 36 inches by 24, and it's got measurements all the way around so that you can use this as your guide for cutting. And then the rotary cutter basically just looks like a mini pizza cutter, and it's going to cut your deco mesh with nice, clean, quick lines and will help to reduce the fray. They're very cost effective, and I'll leave a link for you below in the description of this video if you'd like to add this to your toolkit. So the first thing I'm going to do is just clean up this jaggedy roll of mesh so that we can start with that clean line. And we're going to cut the entire remainder of this roll into 10-inch pieces. And so using your self-healing mat and rotary cutter or your ruler and scissors, go ahead and cut your mesh into 10-inch pieces. Just cut the entire remainder of your roll, and I'll meet you back here. Once you've cut down the remainder of your deco mesh roll, and go ahead and grab your wreath base and bring it back to your work area. Now, depending on the length of the roll of your deco mesh, you're going to have a varying number of leftover pieces. You'll have at least 16, which will allow you to put one curl in every single set of pipe cleaner ties, but go ahead and use all the pieces. So if you had a larger roll, which would allow you to add 2 curls, that's great. If you can only add 1 curl to each set of pipe cleaners, that's fine. If you're going to alternate, doesn't matter. Just go ahead and make sure you use up all those curls. And to make a curl, guys, all you're going to do is grab a piece of deco mesh, lay it in your work area, curl side up, and roll that piece of deco mesh into a cylindrical tube or curl. It's going to be about 1.5 inches in diameter there in the center, and then of course it will flare at the ends. I only have enough mesh to add 1 curl per set of pipe cleaner ties. So what I'm going to do is come to any set of ties, doesn't matter where you start, every single set of ties is going to get at least 1 curl. Take that curl and place it all the way down to the base of that pipe cleaner, and give it 2 or 3 tight twists. And you just added your first curl. Now, if you have enough to add 2 curls to every single set of ties, you'll repeat that same pattern. You're just going to place 1 curl on top of the other, so it makes a loose X. Place that loose X or double set of curls all the way down to the base of your pipe cleaner ties and secure them in. Go ahead and add your curls throughout your entire wreath base, and I'll meet you back here. Now that we've added in our curls, look how much fuller and cute that wreath base is. The pine pieces within the swag are going to disappear within your creation, so you can truly use this method for all seasons. The widest part is the top of your swag, and the point is the bottom. We're going to use 2 rolls of 10-inch deco mesh to build our base out, guys. And so I'm just going to use a solid 10-inch shimmery white, and then I'm going to use some glittery deco mesh that, as you unroll it, is actually fairly see-through, but it's a really cute base, and it looks like this once you unroll it. Super stinking cute. And there's no set rule on how many pieces of deco mesh you need for a swag, guys. They're all built a little bit differently, and it depends on how closely you put your deco mesh cruckles into the base. And so I always start out with 14 pieces in total of the deco mesh, and then if we need to add more, we can sure cut some more pieces. And so I'm going to cut 7 pieces of the white and 7 pieces of the red. And guys, I don't really measure my deco mesh. I find it quicker just to cut it without measuring. Of course, you're welcome to measure if you like. Each piece is going to be between 20 and 24 inches in length, and I just pull my arm out in front of me. I pull that deco mesh directly up and cut. So I know if my arm is essentially in the same place, Every time I cut, those pieces will be nearly the same size. And again, 20 to 24 inches in length. We'll start out with 7 pieces of the white and 7 pieces of the red, and I'll meet you back here. Once you've got all of your Deco mesh pieces cut, it's time to start creating Deco mesh cruffles to add into our swag base. If you are new to working with Deco mesh loves to fray. So anything we can do as creators to help reduce that fray is always ideal. And the cruffle method is great to help reduce that fray. So to make a Deco mesh cruffle, you're just going to grab one piece of your Deco mesh. You're going to lay it in your workstation, curl side up. I'm going to use my bolt cutters to lay in the middle of that Deco mesh piece just to hold that guy in place. And I would also recommend that you have a chip clip or a clothespin to help with this process. And to make a cruffle, you're going to come to one end of your Deco mesh, and we're going to roll that end 2 or 3 times in to make a cylindrical tube, or what we call a curl. And what that does is tuck away the raw edge of your Deco mesh to help reduce the fray. Once you've curled that guy in 2 or 3 times, take your chip clip and just pinch it together in the middle to secure it. Then spin your Deco mesh piece around and do the exact same thing on the opposite end, rolling it in 2 or 3 times. Once you've done that, it's time to ruffle our mesh. And so I'm going to press down on that curl with my thumbs to hold that guy in place. And then I'm going to use my 8 fingers to scrunch and gather or walk my Deco mesh piece back into my hand. So I'm going to keep doing that all the way to the end of my piece. And then I'm going to release that clip. I'll pinch this guy in the middle, and we've just made our first cruffle. So essentially what a cruffle is, it's also known as a woolen ruffle, but basically it's a curl on each end and then the ruffle in the middle. You're going to come into your pine swag, and we're going to add cruffles starting at the top all the way down one side of our pine swag base to the very end, and then all the way back up. So we're going to take our cruffle. We'll find 2 neighboring pine ties. We're going to add this cruffle all the way down to the base between those 2 neighboring ties and give those ties a couple of tight twists, and that's going to hold our cruffle in place. Let's do one more together and then we'll speed ahead. So you're going to take your piece of Deco mesh and lay it down in your work area. I'll place something heavy in the middle of that piece of mesh just to hold it in place. I'm going to curl that end 2 or 3 times to tuck away that raw edge and create my curl and secure it with my clip. I'll then spin my Deco mesh piece around, curl that opposite end 2 or 3 times, remove my weight, and then I'm going to press down with my thumbs to hold that guy in place. And then with my other 8 fingers, I will walk that Deco mesh back into my hand to create my cruffle. We'll release that clip and give that guy a pinch in the middle. Come back to your pine base and right underneath where we left off. Again, you'll find 2 neighboring pine ties. Place that cruffle all the way down at the base between those 2 ties and give those 2 ties a couple of tight twists. And we've just added our second cruffle. Go ahead and repeat this process all the way down your pine swag and then back up until it's fully loaded with your Deco mesh cruffles. You very well may need to cut some additional pieces. That's totally fine. Make it as full as you want. And then I'll meet you back here. Now that we've got our swag fully loaded, I did end up needing to cut 2 additional pieces of deco mesh, so in total I used 16 pieces, and look how nice and full our swag base is coming along. Now you can add your sign and embellishments. The Deco Mesh Poof and Double Curl Method. If you're new to wreath making, guys, this is what's called a work wreath form. And it comes to you just like this. And so this particular base is 15 inches in diameter. It's got 2 layers, the lower and the upper. These are what we call ties. And there are 18 ties in total on our work wreath frame. And so the first thing we need to do is put these guys where they belong. So on the upper level, just point those guys towards the center, like so. And then on the lower level, we're going to do just the opposite. We're going to point those guys outwards. Here we go. So your work wreath frame should look something like this. So today we're going to be doing the poof and double curl method. It's one of my favorite methods for wreath making when using deco mesh. If you're new to wreath making, guys, deco mesh loves to fray. So anything that we can do as creators to help reduce that fray is always ideal. We're going to be using 3 different colors of 10-inch deco mesh today. We'll be using a burlap colored, a shimmery white, and a shimmery navy. And we're going to start with the burlap colored. You'll also need a standard ruler. And the first layer to this process, guys, is to add poofs to our wreath base. That's step number 1. We're going to start on the lower level. It doesn't matter where you start at the lower level, because at this point our wreath doesn't have a top or bottom. So have your deco mesh, your tan deco mesh roll in your work area and curl side down. Just roll out a foot or so. And we need to get this anchored down into our wreath base. So at the edge, I want you to press down with your thumbs. Your thumbs will be staying stationary and your 8 fingers will be doing the work here. We're just going to crawl that mesh back into our hand. Just like so. And so now we've got this little bitty tail. So once you've got your little tail, then I want you to tuck that guy back underneath into your hands. And basically what that does is tuck away that raw edge of your deco mesh to, again, help prevent the fray. So keep a hold of that with your right hand and then come over to your wreath frame at any set of ties here on the lower level and open them up into a wide V, and then take your deco mesh tail, place that all the way down to the base of the V of those ties and give them 2 tight twists and point them back outwards again. And so we've just anchored our deco mesh down to our frame, and it's time to start making some poofs. To make our poofs, we're going to take our ruler, lay your ruler on the most recent set of ties, come out to that 10-inch mark. And guys, no one's looking for perfection here. No one's going to be measuring your deco mesh. But identify that 10-inch mark and then scrunch and gather your mesh into your hand, just like we did earlier. Turn that right side out. And then you're going to come to your very next set of lower level ties, open them into a wide V, and place your deco mesh all the way down into the base of that V, and give it a couple of tight twists. And we just added our first lower level poof. Let's do one more together and then we'll speed ahead. So I'm going to place my ruler at the most recent set of ties that I've used, come out to that 10-inch mark, scrunch and gather that mesh into my hand, come to my very next set of ties on that lower level, open them into a wide V, and place that mesh all the way down to the base of that V, and give those ties a couple of tight twists. And we've just added our second poof. So go ahead and add your 10-inch poofs all the way around the lower level. And when you get to the last set of ties, I'll meet you back here. Okay, it's time to add our last lower level poof. And so we're going to follow that same method we've been doing, guys. Just take your ruler, place it on top of those ties, identify that 10-inch mark, scrunch and gather your mesh. And we're actually going to be adding this right on top of our starting point where we anchored down. So just carefully untwist those ties. As long as you're careful, I promise that mesh isn't going to go anywhere. So we're going to open those ties back up and lay this pinch of mesh right on top, all the way down to the base. And again, give it a couple of tight twists. And we've just added our last lower level poof. And so now it's time to jump to the upper level. And so what we're going to do to jump to the upper level, guys, is keep a hold of your mesh in your hand and pulling it tautly, come to that first set of ties on the upper level. And we're not going to make a poof here. We're just going to keep that mesh taut. And we're going to come in behind that set of ties and anchor down our mesh at the base of the V of those ties and give it a couple of tight twists. So as you can see here, we've jumped from the lower to the upper level. It's nice and taut, no poof. And now we're going to start adding poofs to the upper level. We're basically going to do the exact same thing that we did on the lower level, except our upper level poofs will only be 8-inch poofs. So you're going to take your ruler, place it on your most recent set of ties that you've used, identify that 8-inch mark, scrunch and gather that mesh, come to that very next set of upper level ties, open them into a wide V, place that deco mesh down at the base of the V, and give it 2 tight twists. And we've just added our first upper level poof. Go ahead and add your 8-inch poofs all the way around the upper level, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, it's time to add our last upper level poof. So we're going to place our ruler on the most recent set of ties that we've used and come out to that 8-inch mark. We'll scrunch and gather our mesh. And we're going to add this right on top of where we jumped our mesh from the lower to the upper. So again, just carefully untwist those ties and add that poof right on top of where we made that jump, pressing it all the way down to the base of your ties, and then give those ties a couple of tight twists. We've just added our last upper level poof. And so now we need to cut off the excess bit of our mesh. And so you want to be careful here, guys, that you don't accidentally cut your poofs or something that you don't intend to. And what I do to help with that is grab that excess mesh and I place my hand between my poof and the mesh. And then I leave about an inch, 1.5 inches or so of that mesh just to make sure it doesn't come undone. No one's going to see it. And carefully cut that mesh away. Just like that. Now that we've added all of our poofs into our frame, as you can see, we're getting some great coverage, but it's still pretty light and airy, and we want that coverage to be more dense. So it's on to step number 2 with our deco mesh. Go ahead and set your wreath frame off to the side. And now we're going to prepare our white and our navy deco mesh. So the next step to our wreath base is to add deco mesh curls. Remember, we've got 18 sets of ties on our entire wreath base. And we're going to add 1 white curl and 1 navy curl to every single set of ties. So we're going to need 18 pieces of the white and 18 pieces of the navy. And those pieces need to be cut at 10 inches. I'm going to use my self-healing mat and my rotary cutter, which if you are new to wreath making, guys, and you've not yet seen the rotary cutter, it basically works like a pizza cutter. And it allows you to cut your deco mesh quickly and with nice clean lines. They're pretty inexpensive. I'll leave a link for you below. If you don't have a rotary cutter and a self-healing mat, just go ahead and use your scissors and a ruler. So you're just going to roll your pieces out and cut them at 10 inches in length. And you're going to need 18 pieces of each. So go ahead and cut your Deco mesh pieces and I'll meet you back here. Now that we've got our Deco mesh 10-inch pieces cut, go ahead and grab a clothespin or a chip clip and your wreath base. And we're going to add our curls into our wreath base. So curls are basically just like what they sound, guys. So grab a piece of Deco mesh and lay it in your workstation curl side up. And you're just going to roll that guy into a cylindrical tube, or what we call in the wreath making world, curls. Just like so. And so it's basically about 1 inch in diameter there in the center. And then of course it flails a bit at the ends. You'll take your clip and just pinch that guy in the center and sit it off to the side. And now we'll grab our second color and do the same thing. So I'm just going to lay that in my workstation, curl side up. Roll this guy into a cylindrical tube so that it's about 1 inch or so in diameter in the center. I'll grab that first curl I made and we're just going to make a loose X seam side down. And we're going to add this curled X to every single set of ties in our wreath base, guys, so it doesn't matter where you start. Just spread those ties into a wide V. Place the center of your Deco mesh X all the way down to the base and give it a couple of tight twists. And we've just added our first set of curls. Let's do one more set together and then we'll speed ahead. So grab your first colored piece of Deco mesh and lay it in your work area, curl side up. Roll that guy into a cylindrical tube so that it's about 1 inch or so in diameter in the center. Grab your clip, pinch that guy in the middle. Grab your second piece of Deco mesh, lay it in your work center, curl side up, and you guessed it, roll it into a cylindrical tube so that it's about 1 inch or so in diameter in that center. We're going to place one curl on top of the other to make an X. You'll come to any set of available ties in your wreath frame. Open that set of ties into a wide V and place that Deco mesh curl X right down in the center of that V all the way at the base and give it a couple of tight twists. Go ahead and add 2 curls to every single set of ties on your wreath frame and I'll meet you back here. All right, guys, we've got all of our curls added into our wreath base and look how full this beauty has become. So it's just got a lot of depth and dimension, super great coverage. And now you can add your sign and embellishments. Adding woodland ruffles to a pine base. Just because this is pine doesn't mean you can't use it year-round. This is a 24-inch pine base that we fluffed out, and now we'll dive into the Deco mesh. We're going to use some shimmery gray and shimmery white 10-inch Deco mesh, and we're going to cut 7 pieces of each between 20 and 24 inches in length. You guys are welcome to roll this out and measure it if that's easier for you, but let me let you in on a little secret here, guys. I don't measure. I find it's quicker just to pull my arm straight out in front of me. And I know if I keep my arm in the same spot approximately every time and then cut at the same spot, my pieces will be essentially the same length and it just goes much quicker. Let's see how long these guys are. So this is coming right in at 20 inches. So again, between 20 and 24 inches in length. Go ahead and cut 7 pieces of the gray and 7 pieces of the white 10-inch Deco mesh, and I'll meet you back here. Once you've got 7 pieces cut of both the white and the gray for a total of 14 pieces of deco mesh, go ahead and bring your pine wreath base back into your work area. We may very well need to cut a few more pieces. Just depends on, you know, how closely you place your pieces throughout the wreath. So if we need more, we'll cut some more. I would recommend that you grab a clothespin or a chip clip. It's helpful for this next step. We're going to add deco mesh cruffles into our pine wreath base, and we're going to secure them down with these pine ties. So to make a cruffle, guys, we'll do a couple of them together, and then we'll speed ahead. You're going to just grab a piece of deco mesh and bring it into your work area, curl side up. If you're new to working with deco mesh loves to fray, so anything that we can do as creators to help prevent that fray is always ideal. So I've laid my deco mesh in my work area curl side up. I just use my bolt cutters here as a weight to keep my deco mesh in place. And at one end, I want you to curl that deco mesh in 2 or 3 times. And what that does is tuck away that raw edge of your deco mesh to keep it from fraying. Once you've curled that a few times, take your clip and just secure that guy in the middle. Spin your deco mesh piece around, and then curl your other end 2 or 3 times. Once you've curled your deco mesh end, then hold that down with your thumbs, and then with your 8 fingers, just walk that deco mesh back into your hand, all the way to the end of your piece. Release that clip and pinch that cruffle in the middle. Should look something like this. And so really what a cruffle is, guys, is a curl on each end and then the ruffle in the middle. And then you're going to keep a hold of your deco mesh cruffle, come to your pine wreath base, and right in the center here, just find 2 neighboring pine ties, place that cruffle all the way down the base between those ties, and then give your pine ties a couple of tight twists to secure that cruffle down. So we've just added our first cruffle. Let's do one more together and then we'll speed ahead. Because we've got 2 colors here, guys, I'm just going to go back and forth. So I'll be doing gray, white all the way around our base. So I've grabbed a piece of our white deco mesh. I'm going to lay that in our work area, curl side up. I'll place something heavy in the middle. And at my first end here, I'm just going to curl that in 2 or 3 times and secure it with my chip clip there in the middle. And then I'll spin my deco mesh around and we'll curl in that other end 2 or 3 times. I'm going to press down with my thumbs and then scrunch and gather the mesh back into my hand to create our cruffle. I'll release that clip, pinch that deco mesh cruffle in the middle, come over to my pine base, and right next to where I left off, I'm going to find 2 neighboring pine ties. I'm going to place this cruffle all the way down to the base between those 2 ties, and then I'm going to give those pine ties a couple of tight twists to secure my cruffle in. So we've added 2 pieces. We're going to follow this pattern all the way around our pine base. And again, depending on how closely you put your pieces together, you may need to cut a few more pieces. That's totally fine. Make it as full as you want. So go ahead and add your cruffles all the way around your base, and I'll meet you back here. All right, guys, we've got our pine base fully loaded with our cruffles, and ironically, the 14 pieces of deco mesh that I had cut in total was the exact number that I needed. That sure doesn't happen very often. And now you can add in your ribbons, signs, and embellishments. Let me show you how to add 10-inch Deco mesh into a 5-gallon paint stir stick base. Go ahead and get your hot glue gun plugged in. We're going to use a 5-gallon paint stir stick. I actually bought these from Amazon in a pack of 10, I believe. I like the ones from Amazon better than hardware stores because they don't have the measurement markings on them and they're just a blank canvas for us to create with. So we're going to start out by prepping our paint stir stick. By the way, guys, these are 17 inches in length with our standard pipe cleaners, which is what we're going to use to add our Deco mesh into our paint stir stick. You will need a total of 9. So the first thing I want you to do is to take your pipe cleaner and make a loop, almost like an awareness ribbon, so that those legs are fairly long. And then give that a couple of 2 or 3 tight twists. And this loop is actually how we or our customers will be able to hang this on our doors. So we're going to wrap those legs right around this indentation here on the paint stir stick. I'm just going to give that guy several tight twists to really keep that nice and anchored down. And then I'll cut these leftover bits off with my small wire snips. And then I'll just take my finger and push that down flat, just like that. And so essentially then the side with the loop will be the back of your swag, and this is how we can hang it up. And so now we're going to take 2 more pipe cleaners right around where we added our hanger pipe cleaner. We're going to run that underneath. So you want that hanger on the back side. You want those legs of your pipe cleaner to essentially be the same length. And you're going to give it a couple of tight twists off to the side. And then point those guys off to one side or the other. And then we're going to add 1 more pipe cleaner right below that and do the exact same thing. However, this time they'll be pointing the opposite way on that opposite side. Just like that. Now we're going to add 2 pipe cleaners in a similar fashion at the bottom of our paint stir stick. You just want to come up about 1 inch or so from the bottom of that paint stir stick. Then we'll add another pointing in the opposite direction. No need for perfection here, friends. No one's going to see your pipe cleaners. Okay, and now we're going to do the exact same thing in the middle of our paint stir stick. You're welcome to measure that if you feel more comfortable doing so. I'm just going to eyeball it. All right, now that we have all of our doubles attached to our paint stir stick, you should have 2 pipe cleaners left, and we're going to put a single pipe cleaner between each set of doubles, and we want those right in the middle there and pointing straight up. So go ahead and give it 2 or 3 tight twists. Okay, so now we've got all of our pipe cleaners loaded into our paint stir stick. Hopefully your glue gun has had a chance to heat up. So now we're just going to run a couple of stripes of glue right over where those pipe cleaners are attached to our paint stir stick. And that'll just give them some extra stability and keep them from sliding around. Once you've got your dollops of glue added to all of your connecting points where your pipe cleaners meet the paint stir stick, go ahead and set this guy off to the side so it can dry. And our paint stir stick glue dollops are drying. We're going to go ahead and prep our Deco mesh. I'm going to be using 2 colors today. I'm going to use this gray and the white. Again, they're 10 inches in width And we're going to add 2 cruffles to every single set of pipe cleaner ties on our paint stir stick. And we've got 8 ties, so we're going to need 16 pieces in total. I'm going to cut 8 pieces of the white and 8 pieces of the gray at 20 inches in length. You can either use a self-healing mat like you see here, along with a rotary cutter, which, by the way, if you're new to wreath making, the rotary cutter is a great tool to add to your toolbox. It's pretty inexpensive, and it lets you cut your deco mesh really quickly and with nice clean lines. I'll leave a link for this below as well. If you don't have a rotary cutter and self-healing mat for measuring, just grab your ruler and a good pair of scissors. So we're just going to measure out 8 pieces of the gray and 8 pieces of the white at 20 inches in length, and then I'll meet you back here. Once you have all of your deco mesh pieces cut, go ahead and bring your paint stir stick back to your work area and go ahead and grab some sort of a clip or a clothespin that will help you as we make our cruffles. And so remember, we have got 3 sets of 2 and 2 singles for a total of 8 pipe cleaners on our paint stir stick, and we're going to add 2 cruffles to every single pipe cleaner all the way up our paint stir stick. So if you're not familiar with Deco Mesh loves to fray. So anything that we can do as a creator to help reduce that fray is always ideal. The cruffle method, also known as a woodland ruffle, is a great way to help reduce and prevent that fray. Go ahead and grab a piece of deco mesh and lay it in your work area, curl side up. I'm going to place my rotary cutter in the middle just as a little weight here and to keep it from rolling up. And what I want you to do on one end, as you can see, it likes to curl. Go ahead and roll that end in 2 or 3 times to make this little tube or a curl. And what that does is tuck away that cut edge or that raw edge to really help prevent the fray. And then just use your clip to secure it. Then spin your deco mesh piece around and do the exact same thing on the opposite end. And then we're going to ruffle the middle. So take your thumbs and place it down on that curl that you made, and then we'll use our 8 fingers to walk this deco mesh, just scrunching and gathering right back into our hand. And then we'll remove that clip and pinch that guy in the middle. And we've just made a cruffle, and cruffle means curl on the end and ruffle in the middle. We're going to come over to our paint stir stick and add that to our first set of pipe cleaners all the way down to the base. We're going to give it a tight twist. You don't need to get too carried away. We're going to add another piece in just a minute, right down at the base. And now we're going to take a white piece of deco mesh, or the secondary color that you're using, and make our next curl. So you've got it in your work area, curl side up. I'm going to roll that end in 2 or 3 times to tuck away that raw edge and secure it with my clip. I'll spin that guy around, do the exact same thing, 2 or 3 curls. And now I'm going to scrunch and gather that mesh into my hand to make my cruffle. I'm going to remove my clip and pinch this guy in the middle. We've just made our second cruffle, and we're going to put this right on top of this gray cruffle that we just added. So I'm going to gently untwist that pipe cleaner and add that guy right on top. Now, cinch your pipe cleaner down really tight and give that 2 or 3 tight twists. I'm going to point them up just to get them out of the way. And we've just added our first 2 pieces of deco mesh into our paint stir stick. I'm going to repeat the exact same thing to the set of pipe cleaners on the right. And guys, because I'm using 2 colors of deco mesh, I'm going to follow the same pattern. So on my set of doubles, I'm going to put the gray on the bottom and the white on the top. And then for my single pipe cleaners, I'll put the white on the bottom, and the gray on the top. So let's speed ahead and add 2 cruffles to every single set of pipe cleaners, both the doubles and the singles. And I'll meet you back here. All right, I've got all of my Deco Mesh pieces fully loaded into my paint stir stick, and look at what great coverage that has already given our paint. Remember, the paint stir stick started out at 17 inches in length, and now it's about 22 inches in length and about 11 or 12 inches wide. So let me show you what it looks like from the back here. You can see how this method would also make a great table centerpiece. So if you didn't want to add a sign, you could load this guy up with embellishments and set it right in the middle of your dining room table or your fireplace mantle, and it would be a great holiday addition. The Dollar Tree 6-inch Deco Mesh No Fray Bubble Method. We're going to make our Deco Mesh wreath on a 14-inch Dollar Tree wire frame. For those of you that are new to wreath making, let's have a little bit of Wreath 101. So this is a wire wreath frame. It comes in a variety of different sizes. We nearly always will use on this channel the 14-inch. Again, it came from Dollar Tree. And as you can see, it's flat on the back, so it can rest nicely against your door. And then the top side has a bit of a bevel. There are 4 rings that go around the wire frame. 1, 2, 3, and 4. There are 6 crossbars for stability all the way around the frame. And then the space between each crossbar is what we consider a section. And there are 6 sections across this frame. So let me show you what we're going to use today. I've got 6 rolls of the 6-inch Deco Mesh from Dollar Tree. You're also going to need lots of 6-inch zip ties. You can also use pipe cleaners if you prefer. All right, friends, today we are going to make what's called a Deco Mesh bubble wreath. You're also going to need a standard ruler. And here's what we're going to do, guys. This is going to seem a little strange, so work with me. First of all, if you are new to Deco Mesh loves to fray, and it loves to grab a hold of itself. And the bubble method is a really great method to not completely eliminate the fray, but basically, because there's very few cuts on this Deco Mesh, therefore very few raw edges. And if you've heard me say before, if you're not new to the channel, I'm going to be transparent with you and tell you I don't generally like to work with the Dollar Tree Deco Mesh. It's just a little bit too see-through for my liking, generally speaking, and frays more than usual. However, the only exception to my rule is for this particular method, known as the bubble method. And this is just a recipe, guys. You can sure recreate this as you would like to do so. What we're going to do here, this is going to seem strange, is layer our 3 different colors of Deco Mesh right on top of one another. And it doesn't matter what order you put these in, because we're going to be separating them out later, and there won't really be any rhyme or reason. So as you can see, I've taken all 3 of my colors. They're laid nicely on top of one another. And now what I'm going to do at the edge here, I'm going to take my fingers and scrunch and gather this mesh back into my fingers, and so it's nicely gathered, and I've got a little inch or so tail. I'm going to cut off these scragglies, and I'm going to take my 6-inch zip tie, and again, if you prefer, feel free to use pipe cleaners, and we're going to start at any crossbar on the frame, friends. At this point, we don't have a top or bottom, so it doesn't matter which crossbar you start at, just any crossbar. And for this wreath, we're only going to be using the inner 2 metal rings, so we won't use the 2 outsides, just these 2 middle 2. We're going to take this tail of Deco Mesh and place it on our crossbar so that it overlaps one side by a solid inch or so. And then we're going to take our tie and we're going to come beneath this crossbar. And then I'm going to take that zip tie and I'm going to cinch that guy down tight, 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 because this is what we're using to anchor down our mesh. So let me flip that over. You can see that I kind of went catty corner over this crossbar to make sure it doesn't slide around. You'll also need a small pair of snips or a really good pair of scissors so that you can cut off your excess bits of zip tie or pipe cleaners as we go. And I'm going to try to keep, a good 10 inches or so of the mesh rolled out at all times. And so now what we're going to do is have a pile of zip ties or pipe cleaners within arm's reach here, which, by the way, if you do use pipe cleaners, go ahead and cut those guys in half. You don't need the full length, and you might as well, to get the most money out of your product. And our bubbles are going to be 8 inches in length. So what we're going to do is take our ruler, lay it down where we've anchored it, identify that 8-inch mark, and friends, nobody's looking for perfection here. No one's going to measure your bubbles. Once you've identified that 8-inch mark, you're going to scrunch and gather just like we did before. And you'll have to continually roll out your mesh here so that you've got some wiggle room. We're going to come back to the frame and create our first bubble. So I'm going to place it between those 2 middle rings. I'm going to take my zip tie or my chenille stem and run it underneath those 2 rings. And then I'm going to cinch this guy down nearly as tight as I can with just a hair of wiggle room, because before I cinch down my bubble, I need to scoot it all the way over to the left where we anchored it. So I'm just going to push that guy over as far as it'll go and then finish cinching down that zip tie. And I'm going to trim off that excess bit. So we've just added our very first bubble. And again, it's placed between those 2 center rings, and then our zip tie is wrapped around those 2 center rings to anchor that guy down. And we're going to add 7 bubbles per section. So what we'll do for this video, friends, we're going to go ahead and complete the first section together, and then we'll speed ahead. So again, place your ruler on top of your zip tie or pipe cleaner, identify that 8-inch mark, scrunch and gather your mesh together, unroll your rolls of mesh a little bit to give you some wiggle room, come onto your frame, and we're going to take our pipe cleaner and run it underneath rings 2 and 3, those 2 middle rings. We're going to cinch it nearly all the way down, scooch that guy all the way over, and then finish zipping it down. And we'll trim off our excess bit of zip tie. Maybe, here we go. So we've added our first 2 bubbles. Let's move on to the third. All right, we've just added our first 7 Deco Mesh bubbles into our first section. Your wreath should look something like this. If you notice it's tightly scrunched together at one spot and looser at the other, you can certainly slide them around so that they're equally spaced within that section. And what we're going to do at this point is basically repeat the same pattern all the way around our wreath frame. Now, approximately halfway around, you are going to run out of mesh and need to start a new roll. Just anchor it down just like we did when we started, friends, and continue on with your bubbles. All right, let's get our wreath full of our Deco mesh bubbles, and I'll meet you back here. All right, I've got my bubble wreath totally filled in, and I added 7 bubbles to every single section. However, friends, and this is not uncommon with Dollar Tree mesh, in my very last section, I've only got 5 bubbles because the mesh ran short. So if that happens to you also, it's no big deal. That's just where we will add our bow to help fill in and hide the fact that we're short a couple of bubbles. So this is what your wreath should look like on the front, and then on the back, it's pretty clean. It should look something like this. And our next step is to spread our Deco mesh bubbles. And so right now we have layered them one on top of another while we were adding them into our wreath. And so now you're just going to work your way around your wreath bubble by bubble and just kind of pull those mesh layers apart. And there's no rhyme or reason to how you do this. It just helps it fill out a little bit more, helps those colors to all shine. And so as you can see, I'm just separating bubble by bubble. And if I pull my orange to the outside on one bubble, then the next one I try to pull it on the inside, and vice versa. I just basically don't want all of my colors following the same pattern. So take a couple of minutes and pull your Deco mesh bubbles, layers apart a little bit, and then I'll meet you back here. I've just finished separating out all of my Deco mesh bubbles, and how stinking cute is this? I'm hoping the camera can capture that for you. You definitely see all of the colors peeking through, that browns, orange, and sage green, and yet they all somehow just blend nicely together. Super stinking cute. And so now that we've added our Deco mesh bubbles, our 14-inch frame is now a 20-inch in diameter wreath. So it's definitely giving it lots of great coverage. This wreath base makes a wonderful wreath, and it also makes a great centerpiece for your table. If you enjoyed today's tutorial, be sure to give this a thumbs up. Happy crafting!